What if I told you there's a completely different version of Fallout 3 you never got to see? If I told you that, I would be lying, because there's actually much more. With so many features, quests, stories, and more completely cut from the final game, there is so much content cut, it could make a game of its own. And today, I'm going to uncover every single piece of cut content, explain it, figure out why it was cut, and what the game would look like if it wasn't removed. Starting with a much larger cut than you would have ever expected at Infiltration. This was supposed to be a main quest that filled a massive plot hole in the original story. You'd have been tasked with retrieving something called an Accelerated Vector Fusion Module from underwater sections of Rivet City, all to get Liberty Prime actually working. The quest had you sneaking past Enclave forces using a special stealth shield effect, diving into areas of Rivet City that were nearly complete but got axed. You'd meet up with Scribe Rothschild to grab this fusion prototype from Dr. Lee's old lab, then report back to Elder Lyons. The whole thing was tied to a cut Enclave assault on Rivet City that Todd Howard personally vetoed because the scope was getting out of control. Without it, Liberty Prime just kinda works in the final game, which always felt weird. This quest would have made the tech retrieval feel earned instead of the giant robot just magically activating. The module itself was based on portable fusion concepts from Cold War research, giving it that authentic Fallout tech vibe. Parts of this quest's ideas eventually made their way into Broken Steel, where we got more Brotherhood technology storylines. The removal streamlined the pacing, but left players wondering why nobody questioned how Liberty Prime suddenly worked after sitting broken for decades. Next up is a quest that would have united the most divided faction in the Capital Wasteland, MS-7. This unnamed Outcasts reconciliation quest is one of the most talked about cuts in the entire game. You were supposed to recover an unspecified artifact, likely an alien disk from a UFO crash site near Fort Bannister, and use it to potentially reunify the Outcasts with Elder Lyons' Brotherhood. The quest had over 50 unused dialogue topics in the files, including ones labeled MS-07 Unity Request and Betrayal Options, where you could double-cross either faction. You team up with Sarah Lyons and work with Specialist Aberdeen, a cut character who was an Outcast scribe, to analyze this serrated data device recovered from the crash. This created a tense situation where both Brotherhood factions had to cooperate despite their ideological split. The alien artifact angle directly connected to stuff we'd later see in Mothership Zeta, with references to the Bureau of Special Affairs, the Center for Extratypical Research, and something called Palandine UFO. This shows Bethesda was planning these alien story threads early in development. Files indicate you would have had a lab scene at Fort Independence where Outcast scientists tried to decode the alien technology. Speech checks would determine whether you convinced both sides to reconcile or if you manipulated the situation for personal gain through various betrayal paths. The quest gave you real agency in shaping the Brotherhood's future in the Capital Wasteland, something the final game never let you do. Instead, we got the Outcasts staying permanently neutral or hostile unless you traded with them, and Operation Anchorage gave you access to their armory after completing the simulation. Fallout 4 eventually made the reunification canonical in its lore under Arthur Maxon's leadership, but actually playing through that moment would have hit different. The cut content mods that restore parts of MS-07 are some of the most downloaded, because fans wanted that deeper faction drama. Now let's get into the cut characters, starting with Aberdeen, who would have played a big role in that Outcasts quest. Specialist Aberdeen. Aberdeen was the Outcast's answer to a scribe meant to be your main contact for the MS-07 alien artifact questline. She would have been the one analyzing that strange disk and trying to figure out alien technology. Her character files show she had full AI packages for daily routines at Fort Independence, eating and sleeping schedules that made her feel like a real inhabitant. She was supposed to have dialogue options about betraying either the Outcasts or Lyons' Brotherhood, making her a morally flexible character rather than a faction loyalist. The cut content mods that restore her usually place her in the Outcasts' lab area, where she fits naturally into the environment. Without her, the Outcasts just feel like hostile tech hoarders with no personality beyond Protector Kasdan's grumpiness. Aberdeen would have humanized them a bit, shown that they had scientists and thinkers beyond just soldiers guarding pre-war gear. Her name suggests she might have been military personnel before the war, given that Aberdeen Proving Ground is a real army facility. Fan theories love speculating that she was the potential betrayer in MS-07, the character who'd sell out whichever faction you didn't side with. She represents the kind of supporting NPC that makes faction questlines feel deeper, someone who's invested in the outcome beyond just following orders. Cut characters like Aberdeen remind us that every faction was supposed to feel more fleshed out than what we got, but here's where the cut content gets darker. Because what I'm about to show you wasn't removed for technical reasons or pacing. Some of this was too psychologically disturbing, even for Fallout. And it starts with a man who documented his own transformation into a monster. Next is a character whose story is genuinely heartbreaking even though he never made it into the game. Shelton Delacroix. This was Fox before he became Fox, a Vault 87 security officer who discovered the FEV experiments and got mutated. His story was told through holotapes that got cut from the final game. The tapes detailed his transformation.
Tell my wife in Dorm E that I love her.
You stupid machine! How you work this thing? This thing is stupid! Smash it!
His horror at realizing what was happening to him, and his gradual loss of humanity as the FEV rewrote his DNA. It was pure psychological horror, like something out of Resident Evil, watching someone document their own transformation into a monster. Instead, we just find Fox already mutated, already intelligent, with his backstory being vague references to experiments. Shelton's logs would have made Vault 87 even more disturbing than it already is, adding that personal element to the FEV horror. The tapes were cut probably for narrative reasons. Bethesda wanted Fox to be mysterious, and giving him a detailed human backstory might have undermined that, but fans who discovered the cut content felt the tragedy even harder, knowing this super mutant companion used to be a regular guy with a name and a job. Similar transformation diaries appear in other Fallout games, like the logs in Vault 22 in New Vegas, showing Bethesda liked this storytelling device. YouTube videos discussing Shelton's cut story get emotional in the comments, because players connected with that lost humanity angle. His removal made Fox more enigmatic, but less tragic, and both approaches have their merits. Now let's talk about the locations that got axed. And I'm not talking about rough concepts. These places were finished, fully modeled, populated, ready to ship. So why did Todd Howard order entire neighborhoods deleted? The answer reveals how close Fallout 3 came to being unplayable. Adams Morgan. This was supposed to be a full DC neighborhood with a preacher character, some kind of bomb setup, and a Talon Company camp. The entire area got cut when Bethesda decided the DC map was too dense. Adams Morgan is a real neighborhood in Washington, D.C., known for its nightlife and diversity, which Bethesda would have twisted into a post-apocalyptic raider haven or survivor settlement. The area had spawn markers for NPCs and items, meaning it was in active development before the axe fell. It was one of many neighborhoods cut when Todd Howard reportedly decided the city needed to be about half its original size. The map we got still feels massive, but it was originally even bigger, sprawling north and west with way more points of interest. Cutting Adams Morgan and similar areas improved performance on Xbox 360 and PS3, which were already struggling with Fallout 3's scope. It also improved the tone, making the wasteland feel more desolate rather than packed with content every 50 feet. Some elements from cut DC areas got moved to the actual wasteland, like how Arlington Library ended up placed outside the city proper. Fans discovered references to Adams Morgan in the game files, including world space markers labeled DC World 02. The neighborhood might have tied into the MS-07 Alien Quest or other cut content, creating a web of lost storylines. Every cut location represents hours of level design work that just vanished because the game needed to actually run on consoles. Another lost area that sounds way cooler than what we got. Rock Creek Estates. This was a park area with hunters, mirelurks, and a character called Grandma Sparkle based on the file names. It was prototyped as Test QA World, a testing ground for enemies and encounters. The area featured a Yao Guai Den and mirelurk hunting grounds, suggesting it would have been a higher level zone for players looking for challenge and resources. Rock Creek Park is a real DC area, a massive urban park that would have translated perfectly into Fallout's exploration gameplay. Having a dedicated hunting zone would have made survival builds more viable, giving players a place to farm meat and animal parts. Grandma Sparkle's involvement is pure speculation based on dialogue files that mention the location, but she sounds like she would have been a hilarious wasteland hunter. The zone got cut for the same density reasons as other DC neighborhoods. Bethesda wanted breathing room between encounters. Test QA World still exists in the game files as an inaccessible cell, haunted by spawn markers and incomplete geometry. Developer Joel Burgess talked about how they had to physically print out the map and cut sections with scissors to plan the reductions. That's how hands-on the editing process got. Rock Creek Estates would have made the wasteland feel more ecologically diverse instead of just ruins and raiders. Those got cut for performance. Xbox 360 couldn't handle it. That makes sense. But these next locations? They were cut from the main questline, and removing them created plot holes that players still complain about today. Then there's a location that would have expanded the main storyline, Freedom Street. This neighborhood included a sewer system and was supposed to have fast travel markers, but never made it past development. It was another victim of the DC size reduction. The name Freedom Street is ironic in Fallout style, probably a bombed-out hellhole despite the optimistic pre-war naming. Sewers in Fallout 3 are always interesting because they're where ghouls and raiders set up camp, so Freedom Street's sewers would have added another dungeon to explore. The fast travel marker being cut means Bethesda got pretty far in development before pulling the plug. Some cut locations were just ideas, but Freedom Street Street had actual infrastructure planned. It might have connected to other metro stations or sewers, part of Fallout 3's confusing underground network that players either loved or hated. The DC Metro system ended up being a maze anyway, so adding another section might have made navigation even more frustrating. These location cuts were necessary evils, sacrificing content to make the game actually playable and not crash every 20 minutes. Console limitations in the Xbox 360 era were real, and Bethesda had to make tough calls. Freedom Street remains free only in the game files, forever inaccessible to players without mods. One more location cut that affected the Vault 101 escape sequence: Vault 101 Reactor Cell. This interior location was tied to that cut reactor restart quest during your escape. It had a full hydroponics section and generators placed throughout. The cell still exists in the files with all its props and lighting, just disconnected from the playable game. You can actually access it with console commands, and it's weirdly complete compared to other cut content. The hydroponics area suggests Vault 101 was more self-sufficient than the game lets on, growing food underground to sustain the population. Having to navigate through there while being chased would have been tense, especially with rad roaches and failing equipment everywhere. Bethesda cut it for pacing, but also because it might have confused players about where to go during an already hectic sequence. The Vault 101 escape is supposed to feel panicked and linear, and adding a reactor puzzle would have broken that flow. Still, it would have reinforced Fallout's environmental storytelling, showing how vaults actually functioned as long-term habitats. The fact that it's mostly finished makes it one of the easier restorations for modders. Sometimes the most interesting cut content is the stuff that's basically done but just didn't fit the final vision. Now let's dive into the weapons that never made it to the wasteland, because these cuts tell a different story. They reveal that Fallout 3's combat was almost very different, and one of these weapons would have completely broken the game's encounter design. 22 pistol. This was supposed to be a weak early game firearm using 22 caliber rounds. Stats show it did only 4 damage with a DPS of 12. The gun would have been perfect for the early game when you're desperate for any weapon and ammo is scarce. .22 caliber is real-world ammo known for being cheap and low-powered, ideal for target practice and small game hunting. In Fallout terms, it would have been the civilian equivalent of the 10mm pistol, something regular wastelanders might carry. The 16-round clip was generous for such a weak gun, letting you spray bullets without much worry. It got cut probably because Fallout 3 already had the 10mm pistol filling that early game weapon slot, and adding another similar pistol was redundant. The 22 ammo type would have needed to be distributed throughout the game world, more loot table work for minimal payoff. Some weapons just don't make the cut because they don't offer unique gameplay, they're just stat variations. New Vegas had more weapon variety, so maybe Bethesda learned from cutting stuff like this. The 22 pistol exists in files with complete stats and a model. Restoration mods add it back for completeness. It's the kind of gun you'd use for 10 minutes before dropping it for a hunting rifle. Speaking of cut firearms, here's a unique variant that sounds hilarious. Black Bart's Bane. This was a unique BB gun variant with significantly better stats, double the damage at 8 instead of 4, double the critical damage, and double the durability with 100 item HP instead of 50. The value was bumped up accordingly from 36 to 60 caps. In every other aspect, it was identical to the normal BB gun. The name references the 1983 movie A Christmas Story, where Ralphie gets his Red Ryder BB gun and takes aim across the yard muttering, "Okay, Black Bart, now you get yours."
Oh, it was beautiful. I could hardly wait to try it out.
Okay, Black Bart, now you get yours.
That line itself was a reference to Charles Black Bart Bowles, a notorious Old West stagecoach bandit. So this weapon had layers of references built into its name. With double damage, this thing could fire about 417 shots before breaking, the equivalent of 5 full reloads. That's genuinely impressive for what's essentially a toy weapon. The weapon exists in the game files but can't be found anywhere in the world. It's only obtainable through console commands on PC or inventory edits on Xbox 360. There's no indication of where it was supposed to be found or what quest it was tied to. The context for why this movie reference weapon exists, and where players would have discovered it, is completely lost to time, but it's nowhere near as good as the next cut unique that would have been perfect for certain playstyles: Wanda. This unique assault rifle belonged to a named Raider and did serious damage using 5.56mm rounds. Those are actually solid stats, making it better than the base assault rifle. The name Wanda suggests it was some Raider's prized weapon, probably a boss enemy you'd fight to claim it. Giving it to a Raider makes sense thematically. They always have the weirdly personalized gear. The 5.56mm ammo was common enough in the game that Wanda would have been sustainable to use, unlike some uniques with rare ammo. Its damage output would have made it a mid-game powerhouse, competing leading with stuff like the Chinese assault rifle. It got cut, maybe because Bethesda already had several unique assault rifles and didn't need another. Or the raider who was supposed to carry it got cut, making Wanda orphaned content. Sometimes unique weapons lose their context and become just stat sticks without the story behind them. Players would have loved having another high damage automatic option though, especially one you could get from murdering the right raider. The files show it was a complete weapon, not just a concept, meaning someone modeled and textured this thing. Every cut unique weapon represents a small tragedy for build variety, but those were just stat variations. This next cut weapon was something completely different, a tactical tool that would have let you turn enemies against each other, and it was tied to the Wasteland Survival Guide. Then there's the cut explosive that actually sounds useful. Mirelurk Bait Grenade. This throwable explosive would attract Mirelurks to wherever you threw it, basically a lure grenade. It was tied to that cut Wasteland Survival Guide stage about studying Mirelurks. Imagine the tactical options. Throw it into an enemy camp and let Mirelurks do your dirty work, or use it to clear an area by drawing the crabs away. It's the kind of creative tool that makes Fallout's combat more than just shooting, giving you options for environmental problem solving. The grenade was fully functional in the files. Modders have restored it and confirmed it works as intended. Bethesda cut it, probably because the Wasteland Survival Guide was already long and they didn't want to add another unique item to a side quest. But fishing bait grenades are such a Fallout thing, combining mundane logic with Wasteland improvisation. You can see the thought process. Mirelurks are basically mutant crabs. Crabs are attracted to bait, so make a grenade that uses that biology. It's practical, funny, and fits the game's tone perfectly. Players would have experimented with it constantly, finding creative ways to cheese encounters. The fact that it was cut but not removed from files suggests it was a late decision. Sometimes the most interesting gameplay mechanics die in development because there's just not enough time. Let's not forget the cut armor that would have made you look ridiculous. Apocalypse Gladiator Armor. This metal armor variant had 36 damage resistance, weighed 30 pounds, and gave you an agility penalty of 1. It was basically heavy riot gear for Wasteland Arena fighters. The name screams Tenpenny Tower Arena fights, or maybe a cut Gladiator location we never got. Fallout has always had that weird Mad Max influence, and Gladiator armor fits right into that aesthetic. It probably got cut because Fallout 3 already had tons of armor variants, and this one didn't offer enough uniqueness. Maybe it was tied to a cut arena questline where you'd earn it through pit fights. The metal armor aesthetic was already covered by Raider and Talon armor, so Gladiator armor would have just been another visual variant. Still, players love cosmetic options, and having arena-themed gear would have been cool. Cut armor is always sad because fashion is the true endgame in RPGs. The game also had cut radio content and holotapes that would have fleshed out the lore. Shelton Delacroix's holotapes. We already talked about Shelton as a character, but his holotapes specifically deserve mention. These recordings would have documented his transformation from human security guard to super mutant. The tapes were designed as audio logs you'd find throughout Vault 87, painting a complete picture of the FEV experiments from a victim's perspective. You'd hear his voice change, his thoughts become more confused, his horror at what was happening.
So, here I am. What the hell am I supposed to do now? Merrick and his team are obviously experimenting on people.
It's incredibly dark, even for Fallout. Psychological horror that makes the super mutant threat more personal. Similar to the Dunwich Building's holotapes, these would have been optional lore for players who like exploring every corner. Voice acting would have made them powerful, hearing someone's humanity slip away track by track. Bethesda cut them maybe because they made Fox's story too complicated, or because they were too disturbing for the game's tone. But fans who found the references in the files felt robbed of that emotional gut punch. The holotapes represent environmental storytelling at its best, telling stories through the world rather than exposition. Audio logs are a staple of immersive sims and horror games, and Fallout 3 was already using them effectively. Losing Shelton's tapes meant losing one of the most tragic stories in the entire game. Here's a location that ties back to that infiltration quest. Rivet City underwater sections. These were planned areas beneath Rivet City where you'd infiltrate to retrieve the fusion prototype. The sections included hatches and underwater passages that would have made the carrier feel more explorable. Rivet City is already one of the coolest locations in Fallout 3, a beached aircraft carrier turned settlement. Adding underwater sections would have reinforced that this used to be a military vessel with multiple decks and compartments. You'd probably need radiation protection or a rebreather item to navigate safely, adding survival elements. The infiltration quest required sneaking past Enclave forces, so maybe they'd set up underwater checkpoints. These sections could have included flooded rooms with pre-war loot, military equipment still trapped below. Bethesda cut them when the infiltration quest got axed, orphaning this environmental work. Underwater gameplay in Fallout is always awkward because the engine isn't built for it, so maybe technical limitations played a role. Still, exploring the depths of Rivet City would have been atmospheric and creepy, especially with feral ghouls or mirelurks lurking. The files reference these areas as nearly complete, making their cut more painful. careful. Sometimes the coolest locations get left behind because the quests that justify them disappear. Here's one that would have been in Southwest DC. Southwest Waterfront. This area along the Potomac would have been another waterside location, probably with Mirelurks and naval themes. DC's waterfront is already used for Rivet City, so this would have expanded that. Waterfront areas in Fallout always have unique challenges. Radiation in the water, Mirelurks everywhere, limited sightlines for combat. Southwest Waterfront might have had boat wrecks to explore, maybe pre-war naval facilities or marinas. It could have tied into Rivet City's backstory, showing other attempts to create water-based settlements. Or maybe it was just a dangerous zone you had to cross to reach something else. The location would have reinforced the Capital Wasteland's relationship with water, which is central to the main quest. Clean water is the entire point of Project Purity, so having more waterfront locations would have hammered home how contaminated everything is. Bethesda cut it during the DC size reduction, prioritizing downtown areas over edges. The waterfront probably didn't offer enough unique gameplay to justify keeping it. Still, atmosphere matters in Fallout, and creepy waterfront ruins would have added variety. Cut waterfront locations mean less environmental diversity in the final game. We've covered quests, characters, locations, weapons. But here's what nobody talks about. When you connect all these cuts together, a pattern emerges. The Outcast's quest gives you alien technology. The Infiltration quest has you use it to retrieve a fusion module. The Rivet City underwater sections are where you get it. The Enclave Assault is what you're sneaking past. These weren't random cuts. This was an entire connected storyline that got dismantled piece by piece. Bethesda cut a whole second act from Fallout 3, and what we got instead was Liberty Prime just magically working with no explanation. The Brotherhood reunification, gone. The alien tech mystery, cut. The Enclave attacking Rivet City, vetoed by Todd Howard himself, that covers the major cut locations. But let's not forget some additional cut content categories. Cut perks and effects. Beyond Kamikaze, there were other perks and effects that never made it. Higher ranks of Life Giver that would have given even more HP, special effect shaders like the atomization effect that dissolved enemies into green particles. These mechanical cuts shaped how Fallout 3 plays at a fundamental level. The atomization effect was probably tied to energy weapons, giving them a unique visual flair when they killed enemies. We got the ash pile and goo pile effects, so atomization would have been a third variant. Higher Life Giver ranks would have made tank builds even tankier, possibly making late game too easy. Some perks may have had bugs or unintended interactions that couldn't be fixed before ship date. Others were probably just redundant, offering bonuses similar to existing perks. The fact that icons and descriptions exist for some cut perks means they were seriously considered. Cut character progression options reduce build diversity, making characters feel more similar. Cut dialogue and radio content. Hundreds of unused dialogue lines exist in the files, from cut characters, cut quests, or just alternate versions of scenes. Three Dog had additional radio broadcasts that never aired. Some lines are for scenes that were rewritten, others are for entire quests that got removed. Three Dog's cut broadcasts would have added variety to Galaxy News Radio, though players still complained about hearing the same news too often. Maybe some broadcasts referenced cut locations or quests, making them impossible to use. But unused dialogue for quest rewards or character interactions represents lost content rather than just alternates. Modders love restoring cut dialogue because it adds depth to existing characters. Sometimes a single unused line reveals character motivations or backstory that completely changes how you view them. These audio files are treasure troves for lore enthusiasts trying to piece together cut storylines. Cut dialogue is lost character development that we'll never experience as intended. If you enjoyed and want to see the 7 levels of Fallout Vaults, click the video on the screen.